Hey, Chandler Bolt here, and joining me today is my friend Grant Baldwin. Grant is the founder and CEO of the speakerlab.com, a training company for public speakers. He's also the best-selling book of the best-selling author. He's not a best-selling book, but well, we'll talk about the process to get. I was going to say he's written a best-selling book, but there's a ghost author or there's a ghostwriter involved. There's a lot to unpack here. He's the best-selling author of The Successful Speaker. He's also the host of the Speaker Lab podcast, and just an all-around just great and funny guy. So this is going to be a fun interview. And if you're a speaker who wants to grow your speaking business using a book, we'll key in on that. That's going to be really helpful for you. If you're an author who wants to speak, we'll key in on that. We're also going to talk about ghostwriter stuff. Should you do it? Should you not? Buying back the rights from your publisher. What? That's even possible. How does that work? Yep. A lot will unpack here. Grant, welcome. Great to have you.
Good to see you, buddy. Thanks for letting me hang out with you.
So why this book, The Successful Speaker? I know. So actually, fun fact, y'all, if you want to go back and listen to episode 35, it's like one of the first episodes on this podcast. Grant and I unpacked, this was before this book, and he talked about, I feel like it was actually, you may have been one of the only people that I had on the podcast that didn't have a book yet. Did you have an early book on speaking, or am I making that up?
No. So when the quick backstory is like, well, I used to speak full time. I was doing 60, 70 gigs a year, did a lot in the education space, primarily with like high schools, colleges. Yes. And so had a self-published book for students. And so had that out. And then back in, I think it was like 2017 or so, 2018, Jeff Goins, a good friend of both of us. He, and those who know Jeff know he's a phenomenal author, writer, knows way more about writing and books than I would ever do. And so he sent me a random text in, I think 2017, 2018. He was like, hey, have you ever thought about writing a book? And I was like, man, I self-published a book. A book's so much work. And I was like, I recognized the value of a book. It just wasn't high on my radar and wasn't high on my priority list. And so I literally texted him back, and I was kind of like, yeah, man, I'll do a book if you write it. And then it kind of led to him going like, yeah, I might be interested. Are you serious? And then it was kind of like this game of like, maybe, are you serious? You know, it's kind of like that first, do we like each other right now? Like, what's happening? And so, yeah, so he was kind of between book projects at the time. And I kind of felt like, again, I understand the value of the book. I had a lot of like the frameworks and the content and the IP and the experience and the knowledge as it relates to speaking, but how do you like pull all that out and put that into a book? Like, I don't know. And I didn't want to mess with that. And so I literally, I was like, hey, I'm serious. Like if you're interested in writing this and kind of pulling it out and being a ghostwriter in the project, like, yeah, let's totally do that. And so that's ultimately what it ended up becoming. And so he was also kind of a pseudo agent in the process. There was a publisher friend of ours that we wanted to work with as the editor and the publisher. So Jeff created the proposal. We took it to this publisher, this acquisitions editor. He was able to get us a great advance. And so worked with Jeff, and Jeff's, to this point, like Jeff's name is still on the cover of the book. And that was something that the publisher even asked for. They're like, hey, we want to put Jeff on there. And I think a lot of times the stigma and stereotype is like, you know, don't tell anybody you ghostwrote. I was like, no, like I leaned into it from like a marketing perspective. Like Jeff is a great writer. Jeff has a great name. He has a great reputation. And so I wanted to lean into like, yeah, this is written by Jeff. And if you know Jeff, he's great at what it is that he does. So it doesn't take away anything at all from, you know, the content or the IP that he, you know, the conversations that he pulled out of me to put into the book. But like from a structure standpoint, he did such a great job. So yeah, that's kind of how the book came to be.
And so leaning into and being transparent about my concepts, his writing, kind of positioning.
He was the scribe. Yeah, he was the writer.
And what, I've got a bajillion follow-up questions and just ways that we could go with this. What, why even do it though? Like, why, obviously him writing it relieves a big burden on you to do this, but what was the thought process behind why do this book, and how did and do you see this kind of fitting in with your overall business goals?
Yeah, good question. So, I mean, at this day and age, like, publishing has certainly evolved and changed, and you know that better than I do, but books are still valuable. And there's absolutely a piece of credibility and legitimacy for people who have a book. And so I think it was something that I felt like would kind of validate what we were doing in the marketplace and kind of, again, put up a stake in the ground, a flag in the ground of just like, hey, we're a go-to authority on this subject and topic. Working with a traditional publisher at the time gave us a lot of distribution. We were in airports and bookstores and yada yada. It was awful timing. The book came out, I think February 17th, 2020. And it was literally like 2 or 3 weeks later. And we were like in airports and bookstores, like, this is awesome. And then like the world closed like a couple weeks later, no events are happening. And you're like, well, crap, that sucks, And so it just kind of, it was what it was. But yeah, it's just kind of like a validity piece of people who are going to see the book. I knew from a marketing perspective, there are ways that we could use the book, free plus shipping is something we've been dabbling in and had good success with. And so, there's absolutely like a lot of value for the book. And again, as you well know and teach, it's not even necessarily about, hey, what is the book going to generate on its own, but it's a really, really, really nice, well done brochure for here's these other services that we offer as a company. It's a really, really good indoctrination tool.
Cool. That's great, man. That's really awesome. Let's backtrack into the ghostwriter piece. How did that work? And I guess even just big picture, gosh, there's so many ways we could go with this. So like, did you just pay Jeff a big upfront fee? Is he doing a fee plus royalty? You don't have to share that if you don't want to. But like, how does that work for people who are unfamiliar what it looks like to hire a ghostwriter?
Yeah. And so, I mean, fast forward to today, like he's really turned this into a business, because what happened was people kind of found out what was going on and were asking me like, wait a second, Jeff's writing your book? Like, does he do that for other people? I was like, I don't know, ask him maybe. And I know like since then he's worked with several of our mutual friends to do the exact same thing. And it's kind of been his own kind of little cottage industry and business that he has developed, and it's done well. And I think like when someone's coming to him to work with him, there's a bunch of different things that he could do, and he could certainly answer this better than I could. But I know with some people he's helped with like just a proposal, and that was it. And some people he helped as a proposal plus kind of shopping it as an agent. And some people he developed the outline, and then that was it. So it's kind of like depends. But for me, it was kind of like, hey man, you know way more about this than I do, and I don't necessarily have the desire or the bandwidth or the excitement to like learn how to do a book proposal and create all the outline stuff. And like, so what the process was basically like, he and I just met a lot, and he would ask me questions, we'd record those. He would just follow up with me, hey, do you have, we're doing this chapter on speaking fees, do you have an example of someone on like one of your students and how they thought about doing speaking fees? And so yeah, let me connect you with Tom, and Tom would add a kind of a case study to that. So that was really the whole process. And it was a really good process. I think a big thing that made it work was that Jeff's the expert, so I firmly believe in just the adage and the idea of hiring good people and get out of the way. And so like with Jeff, like from a financial standpoint, basically like we did some form of a split on the advance. And so it was nothing out of my pocket. And so that was also kind of the incentive of, I remember talking with this mastermind, a couple of guys, and kind of running the idea by them. And I said, okay, we have a publisher that wants to give us a bunch of money and have Jeff write the book. And I was like, what am I missing here? Am I crazy on this? And they're like, hang on. Let me just make sure we got this straight. So a publisher is going to write you a massive check. You're going to give some of it to Jeff. Jeff's going to write the book. You don't have to do anything. And you're going to get a finished book with a bunch of money out of it. I was like, yeah. When you put it like that, it seems pretty obvious. And so they're like, yeah, you're an idiot if you don't do this. And so, yeah, I think again, a big part of that made it work was I wasn't like breathing down his neck. I wasn't like going through every sentence structure. Like, let's, instead of this word, you should use this word, like you're the expert, man. Like, this is why we paid you a whole bunch of money to do this, is because you're really, really good at it. So I think that's part of what made it work with us. And I would also say like, I think it probably would have been a little bit different if I didn't have an existing relationship with Jeff. So,
Yeah, the existing relationship,
yeah,
how good he is, and then how big your advance, I feel like are just three critical
totally.
pieces that lined up to make this work.
Yeah, because like if we didn't have that prior relationship, it probably would have been like, I don't know, like, do I trust this guy?
Are
Is
you
this where,
good? Can you read my
yeah, totally.
voice? Yeah.
But like he knows me. We had an existing relationship. He knows our business. Like we've been friends for several years. So it just is again like it felt like, okay, I can be a bit more hands off here because you're the expert, you're the pro at this.
Yeah, that's great. Uh, on the other side of it, are you glad you did it? And any recommendations for other people who are considering hiring a ghostwriter?
Yeah.
You're like one of the only people I know who I think had a positive experience. like everyone wants to hire a ghostwriter, and it's just so freaking hard to do it well that I hear all the horror stories. So it's kind of cool to hear a good one. So yeah, what are your thoughts on other side of the process and recommendations for others?
Yeah, I did have a great experience. I would definitely do it again. But again, I think like what we touched on there of the existing relationship made a big difference. And it's not to say that like, that is this completely unique situation and it's impossible to find. Like for anybody watching and listening, you've got people that are probably really, really good writers in your sphere of influence and in your world who, may be a good fit for something like this. Jeff had written multiple books. He had good experience with it. The other thing that he brought that was kind of an intangible was he understood like marketing books as well. So if you create a great book and it sits in an abyss, like if it falls in the forest, nobody hears it, like it's not going to sell any copies. And so it was also just like, okay, now what do we do? And so like when the publisher was asking different questions, Jeff was really good about, where do we push back and where can we, is this normal? I don't know, man. So it's just like very much like, hey man, just take my hand and tell me what we need to do, what we need to ask and say. So yeah, it was a great process. But again, I think what a big part that made it work, that is applicable and relevant for anybody, is he was the expert. I did not micromanage him. I did not babysit him. I did not breathe down his neck on anything. It's just like, you're the pro, be the pro, and I'll let you do your thing.
And did you feel like it was written in your voice? Was there any issues with that? Or it was like, hey, this is in my voice. This has got my core concepts that turned out well?
Yeah, absolutely. I felt like there were several things because again, part of what they did was we did a lot of like hours and hours of interviews, and then they would transcribe those. And then it's like, it may be tweaking some sentence structure or that sort of thing, but I mean, a lot of it was pulled in my words. So yeah, he had one other writer that he worked with on it, and he kind of oversaw them. But yeah, I was incredibly happy with the finished product and how it came out. And I still, to this day, I'm just like, it's a really, really good book. And I'm happy to point to the fact of like, Jeff is the guy that was the one sitting down typing it.
That's great. And it probably doesn't hurt. I mean, with Jeff specifically, this is like a niche thing that may not be relevant for a lot of people who are thinking about hiring a ghostwriter, but has a big name and is a big author. And so it's like, that's, if anything, it's a value add, that the transparency,
absolutely,
and that his name's on the cover and all that, because people are familiar with his other work. So it's probably, because he has helped sell some books.
Yeah, I mean, at the time, like a lot of the work that he was doing was with authors and writers and bloggers, and so yeah, I thought, okay, if anything, like worst case scenario, like people in his audience are going to discover the book and be interested in it, and just because that crossover. So yeah.
So talk to me about you mentioned you bought back the rights from your publisher.
Yep.
That doesn't happen often. Why did you do it? How did it work?
Yep. So book came out February 2020. And I remember, for the next several months as the book is out, I think as authors can probably attest, like when a book comes out and everyone's asking, hey, how's the book doing? You're like, I don't, like, it's selling. There's reviews of it. People seem to like it. I don't know, and like it's doing something, but I mean, having a book is just a long-term thing. It's a long-term game. And so as typically it seems to happen with books, like they launch good, and then there's kind of like a trailing down effect there. And so the book came out strong, and like, again, I'm super, super proud of the finished product. And over time, like sales slowed down. I don't think it helped that it was, came out right at the beginning of the pandemic. I don't think that was the only or primary reason. But then like you fast forward a couple years and you're going like, dang, we've got this great book and I wanted to do more with it. We were wanting to try like a free plus shipping thing, but to get, for me to buy copies from the publisher, it was super cost prohibitive. It was really expensive. And so I'm looking at the numbers like, okay, it's not selling a ton and they're just sitting on it. And it's just kind of this stalemate, it's like, it's any effort, energy they're going to put into it is long gone. Like they have moved on to every other book project, so it's like the last thought on their mind. So I remember asking Jeff, I was like, hey, is that a thing? Can an author buy back the rights to the book? And he's like, it's not super common, but we can ask. And so I talked to a couple other people in the publishing space and it's free to ask. And so I reached out to our editor, our primary contact at the publisher, and just like started the conversation like, hey, I know this is probably something that you don't normally do, but is this something you would ever even be open to entertain? And he's like, I don't know, maybe. And it was just kind of like, again, like the book isn't worth anything to them necessarily, like dramatically. And I'm going like, I would like to do more with it, but it doesn't make sense for me to do more with it right now. And the primary buyer for the majority of future copies is going to be me, and I'm not going to buy it at this price, So it's just kind of like, what's the best case scenario out of this, right? So one of the ways that we kind of approached it was, all right, let's just kind of extrapolate out for the next 3 to 5 years. How much are we going to sell potentially, right? And kind of looking at that, looking like, okay, how much are you as a publisher going to make over the next 3 to 5 years? Like, can we just give you that in a check today? Like, what would that look like? And they thankfully, like they were super open to it, super nice about it. And he also acknowledged like, most authors a couple years later, we were in a spot where we had the cash to reacquire the rights, whereas he's like, most authors aren't in a spot where they can do that, And at the same time, I was like, hey, listen, they had given me a good advance. They were going to lose money on it. I was like, I'm not paying you for the difference. Like, it doesn't make sense for me to pay, the difference of the advance. So I knew like, I want to get this for pennies on the dollar. And so, but at the same time, like, again, it's not making them anything, so here's a chance for them to get more than probably what they would otherwise. So again, it just kind of started conversations of what would make this a win for them, what would make this a win for us. There's a lot of nuance of like they had sold the rights to the audiobook to kind of a third party. And so getting the rights from that back, getting all of the, the files that you need, relisting it on Amazon, like all that stuff is just kind of the logistics and nuance that we had to kind of like think through and work through and process through. But long story short, after a couple months of going back and forth and talking about it, we're like, okay, let's do it. Here's the deal. And sign a contract, and now we got the rights back.
Cool. That's awesome. So how does it work now? Are you self-published through Amazon? You got the audiobook rights back?
Yeah.
How are you buying books, printing books, all that stuff?
Yep. So what we ended up doing was the book was only ever printed in hardcover. And so they still had several thousand copies. And so we said, okay, we want to buy the rights back. Separately, though, we want to acquire all of your remaining inventory. And so we basically bought it at cost from them. What we ended up doing, though, which worked out really, really well, was they had several thousand books remaining. And we're like, okay, I don't have anywhere to put several thousand books. And we're not going to ship that to Amazon. And there's different uses we had for it. And so we said, hey, can we just keep them at your warehouse? And as we need them, we'll just have you ship them wherever we need them. And we'll just pay for them as we go. And they were like, cool, that's fine. And basically like so all of the books that are out there that we have been buying from them is just using their excess supply. And so that's worked out really, really well. And so, but we've also like, had to figure out, okay, when we run out at some point, then, we got to print it ourselves. So they're not helping us on it. And so who are we going to print through, and how's that going to work, and formatting and shipping and yada, 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 doing a paperback versus doing a hardcover. What are our costs and all of this? So that stuff over the past couple of months, we've been trying to figure out, is kind of like getting the excess inventory down, to a reasonable level. And then we'll turn on the printer for us printing our own new version.
Cool. Because will you have to delist it and relist it through Amazon?
No,
I mean, I know it's getting technical and kind of in the weeds.
Yeah, like that was a big thing that we talked about with them was, on Amazon, you've got hundreds and hundreds of reviews and just the track record. And you're like, you don't want to lose any of that stuff. I don't want to start from scratch on that stuff. And so basically, like one of the logistical things I know we've run into is if at some point we reprint a hardcover copy, we have to use a new ISBN. If we do a paperback version, we have to use a new ISBN. So basically, it's just a matter of getting of the publisher telling Amazon, of us connecting with Amazon and saying, hey, the rights have transferred. Don't lose this listing. We want to keep using this listing. So you're basically taking a paperback version and connecting it to the existing listing as another format version. So, so that's the primary way that we've been approaching it thus far.
Cool. That's smart. And have you decided to, are you going to do print and stuff through Kindle Direct Publishing or KDP or something else? Or
I believe we talked with a couple different printers. I believe the one that we're working with is Printopia. And so knew a couple people that had worked with them. Jeff had recommended them. So had some conversations with them. And I believe that's last I knew, that's who we were talking with.
Okay. Interesting. This is really cool to see how you kind of navigated that process. Really interesting.
So here's one of the things like Jeff and I were kind of joking about was like, there's traditional publishing and then there's self-publishing. Those are the, you get some hybrid stuff and those are the two primary things. So we tried to come up with our new way of getting a book traditionally published, wait a couple of years, then go back, buy it for pennies on the dollar and turn it into self-publishing. So I don't know if you teach that method, but like, that's just a neat little spin.
The pennies publishing method. You heard it here first.
.com. There you
go. That is brilliant. Oh man. Hey, well, I want to ask before we wrap, I want to ask a couple questions. This interview went in a different direction than I figured, which is actually really cool and really helpful because I think this is something that we've never talked about on the podcast. So I'm going to point people to this for buying back rights and ghostwriter stuff. Let's talk for a bit on how have you grown the Speaker Lab using this book? What are the main things that have worked?
Yeah, one of the things we've started doing recently is really leaning into free plus shipping, and that's definitely been a marketing tool that's been out there for a long time in the publishing space. So it's something we've been doing a lot of, and it's just it's a math problem. It's an economics problem of looking at how much does it cost us for a book, how much does it cost us to acquire a customer, how much does it cost us to ship the book and all the logistics and fulfillment that go into that, and then just making sure that it's offsetting that the part of the challenge is that with a book, it's much more of a long tail. A book someone may get a free plus shipping book and it may, they may open it, read it cover to cover right then. It may sit on their desk or on their shelf for, months and months and months, maybe years. People don't throw away books. They can still be kind of a reminder and a cue card and a billboard unintentionally in their office or house or wherever it may be. So, yeah, I mean, we've definitely already seen like an ROI of people who have purchased the book, and then we can point to like, a few weeks, a few months later, then they joined one of our coaching programs. And so there's, a clear ROI there, but it's also like, we have tried to be really intentional about what do we need to do in that initial offer to try to at least break even on that. Because at that point, then you're not only acquiring customers at a break even rate, but you're also you're just getting books out there break even, which is awesome. So so it's been it's been a learning process if you're just trying lots of things and iterating, but the free plus shipping has definitely been a big win for us.
You're making me think. I'm like, man, I need to spin up some new ad creative for the new version of published, and we need to get free plus shipping has been one of our best converting funnels for a long time, and I don't know why we got away from it. And as the newly appointed marketing director, we're gonna get back in the saddle.
Talk to your marketing guy.
Talk to the marketing. I'm gonna go to the bathroom and look in the mirror, and I'm gonna say, "Hey, marketing guy."
I'm gonna have a meeting. I'll give you a quick thought on this. As it relates to just like how do you best market a book or how do you best sell a book. I remember a couple of years ago, I was talking with a good friend about real estate investing. Hang with me. This is going somewhere. But I was interested in real estate investing. I know you are as well. And I remember just asking asking them, I was like, you have all these different types of real estate investing. You have single family homes, multifamily homes, Airbnb, raw land, commercial, yada, yada, yada. I said, which one is best? And he said, yes. And I was like, dude, that's not helpful. Like, what does that mean? And his point was like, they all work. What you don't find is someone who's trying to do all of them, right? So in terms of like selling a book, what works? Like social media works, paid ads work, free plus shipping works, speaking works, PR work, like it all works. But what you don't find is someone who's like, I'm doing everything, and you're just spreading yourself so thin. So I think about that so much with our business and what it is that we do. And again, this is applicable for anything, like free plus shipping works, but so do a dozen other things, And so it's not that necessarily like one's better or worse than the other. Like you just pick one or two things. You're like, we're just going to do this. We're going to double down on this. We're going to be focused on this. And like, we'll price you. And if we don't, then let's try something different, but not try the buffet approach. If we're going to try everything and just hopefully magically it all works out, like that just doesn't work.
That's great. Don't try the buffet approach. Focus on what works for you. Man,
your mind's blown. You can't even comprehend it.
How you're the master of this, Grant. How can speakers use a book to get more speaking gigs or to raise their fee, increase their take home, that sort of thing?
Yeah, I mean, speaking is definitely a way to generate significant revenue and income from having a book. And so there are a lot of authors who have always said, like, you don't make money from the book, you make money from the other things that you sell on the back end of the book. Speaking being one of those things, coaching, consulting, lots of different things that you could do. So speaking or having a book, like we talked about, is certainly a great legitimacy tool. And there's still, in this day and age, people say, if you want to be perceived as the expert on something, you have a book on the topic. So I would push back on the idea. I think there's a misconception that people think in order to be a speaker, you have to have a book, or in order to be an author, you have to speak. No, you don't. Like there's speakers who don't have a book who are very successful, and there's authors who don't speak who are very successful. And it's not that one is a prerequisite for the other, but working hand in hand, they can be incredibly, incredibly powerful, both from an impact standpoint, from a legitimacy and credibility standpoint, from an income and revenue standpoint. Like I think speakers should write a book. Can you be successful without it? Absolutely. And I do think authors should speak. And can you be a successful author without speaking? Absolutely. But working hand in hand, they can be really, really effective 1-2 punch.
Cool. So let's, my last question and last question or two here, we'll go real quick, is, so go back to the beginning, say I'm a speaker, and I've got a book, I am in that and category, not or category, and I've got a book and I speak, but it's both are kind of small, starting from scratch. What's like one super tactical thing that you would do to juice the speaking side of your business using your book?
Yeah, one of the main things that speakers make a mistake on and authors make a mistake on is like, okay, I have the book or I want to do speaking, and now I just sit back and I wait for the phone to ring. And like, that just doesn't work. Like speaking, selling books, it's very much a momentum-based game. And so the more you speak, the more books you sell, the more it starts to kind of start that flywheel. And so you can't just sit back and assume like, okay, now I'm just going to wait for the phone to ring and people to call me and reach out. So a book can be really, really good to, reach out to send to people. Wouldn't necessarily recommend that you just, smile and dial and send a bunch of random books to a bunch of random people and hope it converts and turns into something. But starting conversations with people, reaching out to people who would be an ideal fit for your audience, for what it is that you, for the types of events that you want to be speaking at, any type of referrals, introductions that you can get from other people who may have connections with event planners or decision makers in your space. One thing I see a disconnect on sometimes with authors and speakers is they want to speak on one topic, but they have a book on a different you should have massive congruency there. Like the audience that you're speaking to should also be the type of people that want to buy your book. And so looking for those opportunities where you can connect the dots. And like we always ask people 3 questions, like who do you speak to, what problem do you solve, and where do those people gather? Like what is that ideal audience? Like what are the conferences, the events, the associations, the groups that they are a part of that you can naturally speak at? And again, the book gives you some credibility to speak to that group. So books and speaking can be, like, again, really, really effective together.
That's awesome. Grant, what would be your parting piece of advice to the Grant from years ago before you wrote this book, and maybe all of the other Grants out there who are maybe speakers, maybe not, thinking about writing their first book, knowing what you know now?
Yeah. A couple things I'd say. One is just to have a long-term perspective on it. It's not this flash in the pan. You and I have both had some level of success in our businesses in large part because we've been doing the same thing for an extended period of time. Like we just keep showing up, and it's not like, hey, is Chandler doing like, FBA stuff now? Is he into manufacturing? No, like he's still beating the same drum for self-publishing year after year after year after year. And it works. It's effective, right? So I think that's a big part, having a long-term perspective. The other thing is, I think you have to treat, like if you have a book or if you want to do speaking, whatever you want to pursue, you got to treat it like a business. You cannot treat this like a hobby and expect business results. Like there's people that are like, I wrote a book and now the checks start rolling in and it all just magically works out. No, like the reason that books sell, the reason that people are successful as speakers is because they bust their butts and they treat it like a business. Like they show up and do the work. And so, and again, this is not exclusive to just authors or speakers. This is true for any business. This is true for your health. This is true for your marriage. This is true for your relationship with your kids. Like if you want to have successful results, then you got to put in the work that successful people do. And so I think like that goes a long way as well, versus again, just kind of like, it's just all just going to work out. It's not if you don't put in the work.
Yeah, man, I'm skimming through my book, looking where I can find this quote, and I'm not gonna be able to find it fast enough. But that's one of
I'll buy you time here. I'll give you one other thought.
The guy who, well, I'll just say it. Do you want to give your one other thought?
Yeah, I've heard it said like it's simple, but it's not easy. It's kind of like losing weight. Like, what do you need to do to lose? Well, I'm not like a health expert, but I know you need to pay attention to what you eat and you need to exercise. Like that's it. It's simple,
it's an equation.
It's not easy.
Calories in, calories out.
Yeah, it's simple, but it still like requires work. Otherwise, we'd all be, skinny and sexy like you, but we're not. And so it requires work. It requires effort. You got to still show up and do the work.
That's good. The quote I was looking for, but wasn't able to find is Ronnie Dance, who runs the fiction side of our business, says, treat it like a hobby. It'll pay like a hobby. Treat it like a business. It'll pay like a business.
Yeah.
That applies to your fiction writing. That applies to your speaking. That applies to success, long-term success. With your book. Grant, this has been awesome, man. Action-packed, high speed, fast-paced interview. This is my jam. Where can people go to buy a copy of your book, to find out more about the Speaker Lab or whatever would be most helpful?
Yeah, everything we do is over at thespeakerlab.com, thespeakerlab.com. And people who listen to this podcast, you probably listen to other podcasts. We have a podcast by the same name, the Speaker Lab Podcast, got over 400 episodes there of all things speaking related. You've been on, I think, twice. So yeah, we've had you on there. Yeah, so go check out.
I was like, man, it's been a minute.
No, you've been there. You've been there. So go check out those episodes with Chandler. The book is called The Successful Speaker: 5 Steps for Booking Gigs, Getting Paid, Building Your Platform. And again, as far as I know, at this moment, we're running some free plus shipping. So you can probably find that over at thespeakerlab.com.
Cool. Check it out, thespeakerlab.com, and the book, The Successful Speaker. Grant, you're the man. Appreciate you.
Thanks, buddy.